Nikolay gazed unhappily at his plate of empty pasta, his dissatisfaction apparent. "This is dinner," Katya, his wife, replied calmly. "Dinner? Is this what you call dinner? I'm a man, I need meat," Nikolay complained. Katya tried to explain conciliatorily, "There's no money for meat," but her words failed to calm her husband. Instead, they stoked his fury. "And where did it all go? Spent on useless things like nails and rags? I just gave you my salary," Nikolay accused. Katya glanced at her neglected nails and let out a sigh. Despite her weariness, she calmly responded, "Firstly, you gave me your salary 3 weeks ago, and it was all spent on groceries. With my own salary, I paid the utility bills and the loan. I didn't buy any rags for myself." Sure, I don't believe you anymore," Nikolay retorted, dismissing her explanation. Katya silently focused on her meal, fatigued by her husband's constant arguments and discontent. The perpetual financial strain and his unwillingness to seek better-paying work wore her down. "To earn more money, you need to work harder," he yelled. "Am I supposed to toil like a horse from morning till night? You should spend less on your salon visits." "Well, at least I work 2 jobs. I'm not idling around like you," Katya responded quietly. "What kind of work do you have? You just spend your days fiddling with chickens. That's not a real job. You could handle 3 shifts with that kind of work," Nikolay belittled. "If it's that easy, why don't you find a job like that? Sitting around and doing nothing while getting paid," Katya challenged him. Katya had some savings, but she was reserving them for a new coat. Not because she desired an upgrade, but because she felt embarrassed to show up at work in her worn-out coat. She did her best to conceal the frayed fabric, resewing buttons and attaching appliques, but it was clear that it was time to part with it. Nevertheless, the following day, Katya went to the store and bought a chicken, dipping into her savings. "Never mind," she consoled herself. "This month, there's a promised bonus. I'll replenish it then." However, the chicken failed to impress her husband. He looked at the pitifully transformed meal with distaste and silently left the table, implying that he would not eat this sorry excuse for food. In reality, Nikolay went to his mother's place after work and dined there, justifying it by claiming that his wife spent all their money on manicures, leaving nothing to eat at home. His mother shook her head disapprovingly, regretting that her son had become such a spendthrift. She served him a cup of boiled borscht, cooking an entire pot of it, hoping it would last a week. The elderly woman saved every penny she could, torn between the choice of eating or affording medication, as the cost of drugs had soared. On payday, Nikolay only gave his wife half of his salary. "I need a new jacket for winter," he explained. "I've been wearing this one for 2 years already. Enough is enough. And what about me? I've been wearing the same coat for 5 years, and that's fine," Katya exclaimed indignantly. "Well, you have a choice, either the nail salons or a new coat," Nikolay retorted. "Really? And what about the loan? And the utility bills? Who will pay for those? Are the utility bills really that high?" he scoffed. "And you should take a look," Katya exclaimed. "I don't care. Am I supposed to be interested in that?" Nikolay responded dismissively. Katya couldn't hold back her tears. Goodbye, new coat. But her husband didn't even acknowledge her tears and silently retreated to the other room. "Stop being hysterical. You better warm up my dinner," he shouted from the room. The next day at work, everything seemed to be going against Katya. After lunch, her boss, Ivan Trofimovich, called her into his office. "Katerina, I can't help but notice that something's bothering you today. Are you in some kind of trouble?" Ivan Trofimovich asked. "No," Katya replied softly, but tears betrayed her emotions and streamed down her face. "All right, let's calm down," Ivan Trofimovich said as he poured a glass of water from a decanter and handed it to Katya. He waited until she took a few sips and then said, "Now, tell me what's going on." And Katya poured out her heart, holding nothing back. she no longer had the strength to carry the burden alone or pretend that everything was all right. "Do you have children?" Ivan Trofimovich asked after listening to her story. "No," she replied sadly. "I'm afraid to." "That's understandable. With a husband like yours, it's scary to have children." "But that's good," Ivan Trofimovich reassured her, gently patting her arm as she stared at him in surprise. "I mean, I can help you on your own. It would be more challenging with children. You see, there's a hostel at our factory, a relic from the past, so to speak. The conditions aren't luxurious, but they're quite livable. One of our workers recently got married and moved out, so her place became available. I'll write you a recommendation, but don't take too long to think it over. There are still others in need." "Thank you, Ivan Trofimovich," but Katya wiped away her tears. "Don't refuse right away. Take some time to think about it. You have a week," the chief said, studying her carefully. "And now, get back to work." Nikolai continued to give his wife the silent treatment, not speaking to her and even refusing to eat dinner. Instead, he would go to his mother's house after work. Katya attempted to make amends, buying some chops with the little money she had left, but Nikolai purposefully walked past the kitchen. However, at night, while his wife was asleep, he snuck into the kitchen and devoured half a tray of meat. Katya noticed the missing food, but she said nothing, hoping that it would lead to reconciliation with her husband. Just before the lunch break, Ivan Trofimovich rushed into the room where Katya and the other women were working. "Girls, I need your help. We urgently need to deliver product samples to potential customers," he exclaimed. The women glanced at each other, hesitating and creating imaginary excuses. But Katya decided to step up and help her boss. "Ivan Trofimovich, let me handle it. I can drive," she offered, standing up from her desk. The clients were impressed with the samples, expressing admiration and promising a significant order. One of the clients even went so far as to compliment not only the products but also Katya herself. He even escorted her to the exit of the building. "Katerina, can we meet again sometime?" he asked, quickly adding, "For business, of course." "Feel free to visit us at the factory," Katya smiled. Her spirits lifted, and she strolled leisurely toward the bus stop. Suddenly, she spotted Nikolai entering a building with another man. Katya cautiously approached and glanced at the sign. It was a cafe. Through the large window, she saw her husband eating heartily, enjoying the food that was brought to him. Determined to uncover the source of her husband's cafe lunch money, Katya decided to enter the establishment and approach his table. Wanting to avoid causing a scene, she opted to eavesdrop on their conversation first, hoping that perhaps the man was treating her husband as a gesture of gratitude. The tables were separated by small partitions, and Katya discreetly took a seat at one of them. "The ribs are delicious today," the stranger remarked. "Yes," Nicholas replied, "but the salad was disappointing. Not enough dressing and lacking salt." "It's just right for me." "I don't know. You're just picky," the man chuckled. "Have you forgotten what your wife serves for dinner?" "I don't have dinner at home anymore," Nikolai boasted. "Do you go to a restaurant then?" "No, I go to my mother's. She knows how to feed a man. Besides, I can't afford to eat out twice a day." "Doesn't Katerina wonder why you give her so little money?" "She thinks I earn the same as I did 2 years ago. She doesn't need to know my actual income. Soon, I won't give her any money at all. She'll manage. It's enough that she lives in my apartment." "And what if she leaves? Who needs her? She's worthless." Listening to this, Katya's anger flared up. She denied herself so much because of this man, and he dared to talk about her in such a disrespectful manner. Katya wiped away her tears and emerged from her hiding place. "You're mistaken, Kolya. I'm leaving you, and I'll file for divorce," she declared. "Don't be hysterical. Stop embarrassing yourself and leave." Nikolai quickly regained his composure upon seeing his wife. "See?" He turned to his companion. "She not only looks like a homeless woman, but can't cook either. and she's always hysterical. I'm tired of her tantrums. Nikolay shouted at Katya. Do you know why I look like a mess? Katya glanced at the cafe patrons who were observing the unfolding drama with interest. Because he spends his salary on himself. Meanwhile, I work 2 jobs to pay the bills, the mortgage, and buy this meager excuse for a meal. And he eats his mother's food, a retired woman, without even considering that her pension is barely enough to survive. If she feeds her son, she goes hungry herself. I'm leaving you. Katya turned and headed toward the exit, leaving behind a solemn silence that engulfed the cafe. Hysterical, Nikolay shouted after her, but she didn't even look back. Actually, Kolya, the man sitting across from Nikolay, interjected. Your wife doesn't strike me as someone who spends all her money on herself. And the fact that you eat at your mother's is beside the point. You don't pay for her meals, do you? I highly doubt it. You spend all your money on cafes and clothes, and you're cheating on your wife. Who are you listening to? Nikolay began to make excuses. I'm not listening. I can see that everything she said is true. I'm sorry, but I find it revolting to sit at the same table as you. With a furious expression, Nikolay threw some bills on the cafe table and stormed out, filled with anger and a vengeful determination. He could hardly wait for the end of the day to rush home. Katya, he shouted from the doorstep, but there was no response to his call. Without even changing out of his clothes, Nikolay entered the living room, then the bedroom, only to find no trace of Katerina. Sensing trouble, he hurriedly opened the closet, discovering that his wife's belongings were also gone. Rushing to the kitchen, he found it empty, except for the apartment keys left on the dining table. Fine. Let's see how long you'll last. You'll come crawling back eventually, he muttered in frustration. Meanwhile, Katya fidgeted in front of the mirror, admiring her new clothes. Since leaving her husband, she unexpectedly found herself with some spare money that she had saved up. Today, as she deposited part of her paycheck into her savings box, she was astonished to discover a substantial stack of bills. Katya counted the money and sat down on the bed, amazed. A new coat was now within her reach, and the new boots were a delightful bonus. Surprised, laughed her roommate, Svetlana. Did you think Santa Claus paid a visit? I don't even know what to think, whispered Katerina. So what's there to think about? We don't pay much for the dormitory. You don't have any loans to pay off. You only have yourself to take care of, and you eat like a bird. That's why you've saved up. You've been earning enough to support yourself, and you even have a second job. So there's nothing surprising about it. Joined by Svetlana, Katya went to the mall and bought the coat and boots. Then they treated themselves to a celebratory ice cream at a cafe. Is Roman coming today? Svetlana asked with a mischievous glint in her eye, enjoying her third serving of ice cream. Roman was a customer to whom Katya had shown samples. He had started courting Katya shortly after she moved into the dormitory. At first, she had resisted his advances, but under Sita's persuasion, she eventually agreed. Let him prove that not all men are like your Nikolay, her friend had urged. Today was their third date. Usually, they would take walks in the park because Katya felt self-conscious about her old clothes. But today, she was ready to accept his invitation to go to a cafe. Nikolay sat gloomily, picking at his plate of sticky macaroni. He had not a single penny in his pockets. During the first month after Katya left, he carried on with his life as usual and even felt a sense of relief that he no longer had to provide for his wife. However, after a month, he received a phone call. You have an overdue loan payment. Penalties have been assessed, and we expect payment in the near future. Nikolay was outraged. How could this be? Wasn't Katya responsible for the loan payments? He called his wife, intending to scold her. The loan is registered in your name, and the item purchased with that credit is still with you. So why should I have to pay for it? Katya calmly responded before fainting. As time went on, the loan debt accumulated alongside the utility bills. Nikolay never bothered to consider who was actually paying the bills. They turned out to be quite substantial, especially since he constantly forgot to turn off lights and water. There was nothing he could do. After receiving his salary, Nikolay used it to pay off his debts, leaving him with almost no money. He went to visit his mother, but she was not at home. She had been hospitalized. By spending nearly her entire pension on food to feed her son, the elderly woman couldn't afford the necessary medication, leading to complications that landed her in the hospital. Even meals at his mother's house no longer provided solace for Nikolay. With what little money he had left, he purchased the cheapest pasta, hoping it would sustain him until his next paycheck, all the while cursing Katerina to no end. After a week of this meager diet, Nikolay couldn't bear to look at another plate of pasta. Desperate to alleviate his hunger, he decided to go for a walk on his day off. As he strolled the streets, he observed townspeople leisurely enjoying themselves, visiting cafes and restaurants. In one restaurant window, Nikolay caught a glimpse of his ex-wife. She appeared younger, more radiant, and was laughing at something a well-dressed man across from her said. Abruptly, Nikolay turned around and dashed back home, back to his cold pasta.